I've always seen mechanical keyboards as a fun hobby to get into, especially because it involves an actual tool that most of us use every day. But sometimes some of us can take it a bit too seriously, and I guess that's fine because there are no rules and you can enjoy the hobby in your own way. But what I enjoy the most is bringing it back to having fun. So today we're going to build a keyboard that doesn't make sense, and this is the Pain27. Here's the PCB, and this was a project between some guys in the Australian Mech Discord. And as we can see, this thing is tiny with just 27 keys as the name suggests, with only the actual letters and spacebar. They do have files for an acrylic case, but I recently got this cheap scroll saw from someone, so I plan to do a bit more, basing it on the F62PE, which is based on the IBM F62. First, I'll make the plate. Here I have a modified version of the drawing they provide on GitHub, and ideally you would get this laser cut for ease and accuracy. I'm using 3mm thick clear acrylic, and then it's just a matter of drilling and cutting. Used scroll saws can be found for very cheap. I picked mine up from some guy who didn't even open the box. And scroll saws are usually for small, intricate work using a thin blade that just goes up and down. The special thing that differentiates it to, say, a bandsaw is that it can get inside holes, which is of course necessary for these cutouts. At first I was pretty slow, as you can see, but then I gradually got faster and more accurate. The cutting itself is pretty fast though, it's just having to remove the blade after every cut is what takes time. But yeah, I'm never cutting a plate again, laser is infinitely better. Alright, so here's everything cut, and it's not the cleanest, so I'll give it a bit of a file. Now with the plate made, I'm going to build some of the actual keyboard, as I'm not exactly sure how everything will fit together, in particular the tough placement of the ProMicro controller. So let's get soldering. First we'll do the ProMicro, which is a popular microcontroller used in many community made PCBs because of its accessibility and price. And this is just a Chinese clone of the actual one, by the way. And then each key needs a diode, and we also have a couple of resistors for the LEDs. I'm actually not going to install in-switch LEDs, so not all of these are necessary. One of the cool things which I took into account when designing this case is that this has RGB underglow lighting greatness, and these are the only SMD components that we have to solder. Back to the case now. Again, using that drawing from GitHub, I added a bit to make the top half of the case, which will be made from this piece of red oak, which is a hardwood. It's not the best looking piece, but it'll do. This is an 18mm thick piece, and the scroll saw had no problems cutting through it. Being 18mm thick though, it's way too tall, so I had to thin it down. Unfortunately, I don't have the capacity to resaw on my bandsaw, so I went through the painful task of sanding it down. One of the major design elements of the F62 board is this cutout at the front to access the keys. Unfortunately, this isn't something that the scroll saw could do, so I had to use my router, although you could potentially saw and chisel it out. And once that's done, it's all a matter of sanding to create those curves and then coating it. Now to the bottom piece. The bottom piece of the case is pretty simple. I have some sheets, the white pieces actually being polycarbonate, and the idea is just to stack them, glue them, and paint them. I lost the footage of the cutting, but with this it doesn't need to be super accurate as the outsides will be sanded and the insides won't be seen. I wasn't really sure on how to glue these pieces together. I tried normal PVA glue, which you would use with timber and such, and that seemed to work fine. And I also tried this PVC cement stuff which I had, and that seemed to work as well. micro USB port. The ProMicro is positioned in such a way in that it is isolated but orientated in this horizontal position. Therefore the port is on the side. I could have a right angled cable and route it out the back, but I think this adds to the charm. I could have and really should have cut these holes prior to gluing, but yeah, I didn't. The case is pretty roughed up, so I caked on some primer filler to try and fill up everything, and I also painted the plate black. With painting, you just have to be patient. You gotta wait for the stuff to dry and then sand in between coats and all of that. I finally got the bottom piece into reasonable shape. The USB hole that I made was actually too high, so I had to redo it on the other side. It's kinda dodgy, but I shoved some pieces of acrylic in there and just filled it up. Deciding on what color to paint the bottom was very difficult. I have to use SA profile keycaps due to their height, and I don't really have much available. At first I did try matte black and I thought it looked really good, but to go with the royal key switches I just went with purple. And yes, I am using the new Kailh Box Royal key switches. These are super tactile switches developed by Novel Keys and of course made by Kailh. They're a very interesting key switch. They have that very prominent tactile bump which is very close to the top, so you have that prolonged bottom out. But yeah, it's all about that strong bump which is definitely on the higher end. For the keycaps, I've gone with the uniform SA keycaps from the Vortex Vibe. Because my plate is flat, it does lay quite low, so shorter keycaps like Cherry Profile sit a bit too low. It works with the F62 because it has an angled plate, so while some key switches will be submerged, the others will rise above. I still have this cutout here for the ProMicro which I didn't need anyway. Plus the key switches do look a bit exposed, so I cut some pieces to fit into those spaces.
Life is just always mysterious and surprising. You never know what's around the next corner. You never know what's around the next corner.
And to finish it off, I just cut and painted a piece of acrylic to use as the all-important pen rest. And here it is all done, and it turned out alright. Everything fits and it looks relatively clean. I do think that I succeeded in somewhat resembling the F62 PE, which I absolutely love the look of. I love the look of the wood, again not the prettiest piece of timber, but I'm happy with the shape and overall finish. There are a couple of things that I didn't get quite right. The mounting plate that splits the two halves is too thick at 3mm. It looks kind of disproportional with the gap being that big, so I think 1.5mm or even 2mm would have been better. The angled plate on the original really does give it its look. I couldn't be bothered to do that, so I just have the flat design for simplicity, and that brings in the complications with the keycap heights and all that which you saw. And these keys are pretty wonky, like pretty bad. I'm not completely sold on the purple. I think it doesn't come off too well in matching the wood. I feel that the black really popped and contrasted really nicely with the wood, so it's a more muted look rather than punchy, which I probably would rather have. As for the actual usability, it's terrible, absolutely terrible. I didn't even try to use it for more than a couple of minutes because I don't have the time. This is purely a display piece because for anything that isn't a speed typing test, it was just too much to access the other keys. To access the other keys, there are layers which are accessed by holding some keys down. So for example, to press backspace, I have to hold the spacebar and press P. But yeah, I don't care about that. I'm happy with what I've done. I'm happy with what the boys have done. It was a fun project to get familiar with the scroll saw, and since I probably will never be able to get an F62 PE, I now have this instead.